Hi there, I'm Amanda Castor with Material Girl Quilts. Today I'm here to share with you how to hang a mini quilt. I have been asked this question a lot over the years, so I thought I'd share my favorite option. In my house, I have quilts hung all over the place, and I've used a number of different methods. One option for hanging small quilts that a lot of people like to use is by simply purchasing thumbtacks, and clear ones work best, and placing them in your quilt top right where the binding and quilt top meet, and you simply just put them in the wall. It's a great option, quick, easy, and works for a lot of people. It's not my favorite option because the thumbtacks will, they are thicker, the posts are, so they could, when you remove your quilt from the wall, they could leave a small hole in the quilt. But if you're not planning to ever take it off the wall and you know that you're always going to just hang it, then it's a great option for you. The second option that I have used a lot, and not just for small quilts but for larger quilts, are these needle strength pins. I will include a link to these in the video description, but I have used these for mostly larger quilts, but you can use them for small quilts as well. And as you can see in the My Town quilt that's hanging in my sewing room, what I will do with these is for each corner, and then once or twice along the width and length of the quilt, depending on your quilt size, you will simply hammer these into the wall like you would a nail. I know that seems crazy, but it works. So these have a flat head. It allows you to hammer them into the wall. This shouldn't give you any problems. They hammer in pretty easily as long as you hammer gently. And when you do hit a stud, they won't go through a stud. So you'll have to pull that pin out, move over a couple of inches, and hammer it in there, and it'll work great. Now, my favorite option though for hanging a small quilt is by creating these hanging squares on the back side. And that's what I'm going to show you today. So let's get started. Okay, the quilt we're using today is actually the table topper that I showed you how to make in the last video. Now, I'm not planning to hang this on the wall, but by creating these hanging pockets, it'll give me the option if I choose to in the future. So what we will need to create the pockets are simply 2 squares of fabric. Now, these squares were cut at 8 inches because that's the size of scrap that I had. For a 32-inch quilt, I might have gone 9 or 10 inches if I had a bigger width, but these will actually work fine as well. So what you'll do then is you take your squares of fabric, fold them on the diagonal, and then place them in adjacent corners, and you will pin them in place. Once they're pinned in place, then you can add your binding to your quilt. And once your binding is sewn on, so here I have my binding ready, and if we sew the binding onto the front of the quilt, it will catch these hanging triangles here when you sew it on the front, and then also when you flip your binding over and you either hand sew or machine sew, then those hanging pockets will be completely sewn in to the back or to the binding. As you can see here, there's 2 pockets and they're sewn into the binding. So the only drawback of this method is that you have to plan ahead and know if you think you want to hang a quilt that you'll have to add these before you put the binding in. But it's as simple as that. Now, for the size of the squares, like I said, these for this quilt were 8 inches. I think you could go up to a 10-inch square for a 32-inch quilt if you're wanting to hang it. This quilt here, it's one of my favorites. It's been hanging in our living room for years. It is 20 inches wide, and the squares I cut on these were like 5.5 or 6 inches. This quilt is 24 inches, and the squares that I cut for these were 7 inches. So I think you just use your best judgment and to create your squares and what you think will be big enough to hold. Now, how do you hang with these squares, you say? Well, what I do is use dowel rods. Now, you can purchase these dowel rods at your craft stores similar to Joann's, Hobby Lobby. I think you can probably also get them at your hardware store. They have multiple options. There's round dowel rods, which is the traditional. This one is actually, I don't know that you can see, but it is a square. It's a 1/4 inch in size and it's square. Now it's the one that's been hanging with this quilt for years, and all you simply do is take your dowel rod and slide it up into the pockets. And when you go to hang it on the wall, it hangs perfect. Now this one is what, as I said, was a square dowel rod, and it works great to just hang on a nail in my living room. The other option for dowels that I've used a number of times are these rectangular shape. They are thinner on one side than the other. And these are great for, as you can see, I have brick walls throughout my house. In my sewing room, above our fireplace, and I want to hang things on them. So the best way I have found to hang anything on the brick walls are these amazing brick hangers. I got them on Amazon. I have multiples that I've purchased over the years, and you can hang anything on brick with these. And I'll show you that you simply just put it over the bricks on the wall, and then you can, there are hooks that you can hang things into. So this dowel rod here that is a rectangle where it's thinner than one side, you can simply slide it into this hook here and it will hang. So these are great. You only need one of these for a small quilt. It'll hang well. It can hold the weight. If you have multiple or a larger quilt, you can use one in multiple spots. Another way that I use these brick hangers for quilts are on my fireplace. I have a larger quilt. I have Buttercup, that's what I call her. She's hanging above our fireplace. So she is too wide to do a dowel rod. So what we use with the brick hangers is simply these hooks here. We will take just a glass head pin that you can't see the head, and we actually do this before we get up there. Just, you know, pin it through so that you can create the pin on this side, and it simply slides into the brick hanger there. That's how I hang all of my quilts when I'm taking photos for the pattern fronts. Everything that's on the quilt on the outside of our home, that's how I hang it, was with these brick hangers. Now here are some of the quilts that are hanging in my house. I hope this video was helpful and that it inspires you to pull out all of those favorite small quilts that you have stashed away and get them hung on the wall so that you can admire them. If you enjoyed this video, please click the subscribe button and the bell to be notified when new tutorials go live. Thanks, and see you next time.